Time now for our In Focus segment, in which we are discussing about how safe is Fukushima discharge plan. And joining me are Dr. Rajiv Nayan and Professor P.K. Joshi. Dr. Nayan is a senior research fellow at the MP-IDSA. It's a state-funded think tank headquartered in New Delhi. And Professor Joshi teaches at Jawaharlal Nehru University, New Delhi. Gentlemen, welcome to News Night. Dr. Nayan, if I can come to you first, what does the science actually say about all of this? I ask you this because the UN Nuclear Agency's chief says, and I'm paraphrasing his comments here, he says there would be negligible impact on humans, on people and environment. Your thoughts, Dr. Nayan?
No, actually this idea was conceived by Japanese in 2021 and it was Japanese government's idea.
Okay.
And they proposed it, and they had got their own nuclear regulatory agency which oversees all the activities which are taking place. And you have rightly pointed out, in 2011 in Fukushima Daiichi, that nuclear power plant had accident and water is contaminated. Around 1.3 million liter of water is contaminated. And the point is, as you have rightly pointed out, they have got capacity around 1,000 tanks they have got, but now they are finding that it is not feasible to just store all the water. So they have to discharge some of the water. So they approached IAEA, and IAEA is not, as IAEA said that it is not endorsing, but what IAEA is saying that whatever is happening, it should be according to regulation. It should be international safety standard, and whether Tokyo Electric Power Corporation is meeting that standard or not. So basically, its role is to just oversee what is happening. And some laboratory comparisons have been done, and IAEA has found that it is doing all right, and it is meeting international safety standards. So there is no danger, and it is a global practice. Many other countries also discharge such water in sea or in ocean. And basically the issue is tritium. Others are purified and water has been filtered. So this is the issue. And in fact, when one task force was constituted, several countries had their independent, quote unquote, independent experts on it, including China. So China, South Korea, all have got. So there I would like to just point out. Now South Korea has basically, it is not all the neighbors. Basically, Pacific Island countries have got some doubts. Taiwan, not a country, but yet it is an entity, but it is supporting Japan. South Korea has supported Japan. Now I don't know what it is going to say. China is the only country in its neighborhood which is opposing it, and it has got its own argument, and its foreign ministry has put forward the argument. United States initially expressed some concern, but now it finds that it should be done carefully, and time and again it should be done. Many labs of European countries have also checked it, and not only before now it is being discharged, but even before the discharge was done, they tested all the parameters of the TEPCO, and now they will keep monitoring, and they will keep setting this regulatory standard also if required. So
fair enough. Point taken. Professor Joshi, Dr. Nayan there, informing our viewers about the scientific aspects, what the science actually says about this entire issue. I want you to come in on the legal or political aspects to this issue at hand. What Japan is doing and what the UN is agreeing with, is it legally sound or legally tenable? What about its legality, number one? And number two, do you think, as Dr. Nayan was pointing out, this issue has indeed become politicized?
Well, good evening to all. The way we look at regulatory bodies, and especially in this case, when we are looking at United Nations International Atomic Energy Agency, which it is talking about, it is considering many of the international regulations, and based on that, it is giving its recommendation. And the science part of that has been tested and tried. But if I try, rereading the statement of the director, it doesn't say no impact, it says least impact. So that raises a question. But at the same time, when you look at oceans or such type of biological resources, there is always a transboundary, diffusion of things. So the neighboring countries, and specifically in this case, South Korea and China, they have expressed their concerns, including some of the other Pacific nations. But as you are saying, it has also taken a political color or a geopolitical angle, wherein a country which has faced a disaster in 2011, which has tried its level best for the last decade to store this, but there is always a capacity beyond which it can't go, and it has to find out a solution.
Right.
So it tried looking at how it could be released to the ocean bodies, and with bare minimum, and specifically, when radioactive forms are being talked about there, so it is titanium, a radioactive form of hydrogen, which is very loudly being talked about. But the concentration which has been talked here, that is much lesser than which, many of the other releases are there in the across the oceans. So that way, I do see a political angle as well, in addition to affirming the regulatory forms which IEA has taken care of.
Indeed, Dr. Nayan, you spoke about what the UN agency and its chief Grossi have had to say on this issue in the last few days. But I want to ask you about Japan's defense. Now, Japan has said a couple of things. One, for instance, the Japanese Prime Minister Kishida Fumio says Tokyo will, be transparently sharing scientific evidence going forward, number one. Number two, indications are that the water will not be released in one go. It will be done in tranches, installments, over a number of years, perhaps decades. The entire process could last, some people say, 30 to 40 years. And by the way, Japan is still to take a decision on whether to release the water, and if so, when. So what do you make of Japan's defense? Does it hold in your estimation?
Well, definitely, like it will be released over 35 to 40 years. This has been planned. Plus, there could be intervention if it is required. They can change it also, because there will be constant assessment, environmental assessment, which will be done by Japanese agencies. It will be monitored by other labs also. Like already many labs, like one Monaco labs of IAEA Marine Environmental Laboratories, Radiometrics Laboratory is involved. Two Austrian labs are involved, like Terrestrial Environmental Radiochemistry Lab is involved. Isotope Hydrology Lab of Vienna is involved. Several like Speech Lab of Switzerland is involved. French lab is involved. American lab, Los Alamos National Laboratories lab is involved. Even South Korean lab is involved. Korean Institute of Nuclear Safety is also involved. So it is not that they are sharing. And in fact, Japan is not a country. It is not like China. Japan has been putting forward whatever samples it has collected. In fact, not only sampling, but even analytical, several methodology which it has followed to reach at the conclusion. And in fact, that findings or conclusions have been generally agreed upon by all the experts. Some experts may have different viewpoints, like accumulation, bioaccumulation, if it takes place, how are you going to deal with that? And many people say that, even if it is diluted, over diluted, but it can gradually enter into food chain system, and through bacteria or through plants or through even animals or marine life, marines. It can later on, much later, it can have an impact. And many say that because of the Pacific problems, even Californians have been affected. So there are so many viewpoints being put forward. So that's fine, but all are being assessed. If you read the report, which has a comprehensive report released by the IAEA, you will find that all the aspects have been taken care of. And I don't think Japanese generally tend to bluff. Japanese generally put forward, and especially they have got very bad publicity because of Fukushima. So they would not like to do anything which can again tarnish their image. So Japanese are cooperating, coordinating with other countries. And there are several countries, several experts all are involved in the process. And as you raised the question, transparency, this transparency factor is very much there. And in fact, that's why Rob Rossi, who is not considered to be a man of Western world, he is generally an Argentinian, and he is considered to be sympathetic to non-Western world. So I don't think he will have any personal agenda.
Okay, fair enough.
That will passed by IAEA. So that is the most important thing, and is the most I can say credible regulatory authority. There are regulatory. WHO has got its own standard.
Right.
US has got its own standard. Plus Japan has got its own standard, separate standard. So like 15,000 becquerel of water per liter of water is being released. So this is why it is called negligible.
Right.
So there will be there, but negligible becquerel, this kind of water, 1500 has been agreed upon. Okay, it is safe and it is better than others. So this is the situation. So
fair enough. Point taken, Dr. Nayan. Coming to you now, Professor Joshi, Dr. Nayan saying that due diligence has been carried out at multiple levels in multiple countries to finally come to a consensus or agreement that the water can and should be discharged given the practical constraints of storing it in tanks for years on end. But that said, I hear you when you say that the language used by the UN agency talks about negligible or least damage, as opposed to saying a categorical no to any damage caused by this discharge. But that said, perhaps that sentiment or thought has feeds into this domestic fears inside Japan as well, especially the fishing industry, who fear for their livelihood and their industry and food security in particular. Do you think those fears are credible to some extent?
Well, the way, radioactive waste is being talked about globally, there is a very high degree of uncertainty which is still associated with that. And the degree of clarity is still, very bleak. Though we do respect, as my co-panelist was mentioning about the protocols and the ways different nations have participated into this, and also giving due credit to the component of Japan involved in such kind of things. But still, the uncertainty still lies, and we talk about its involvement or its integration in the environment through water and through food chain. That is something which is still doubtable. And at present time, whensoever food products are being certified, are being talked with respect to eco-friendliness. So there will be always a degree of uncertainty which will be associated with the produce which are coming from this part of the world. So the livelihood issue will be a challenge. But if you look at from the environmental perspective or the ecological perspective, though the concentration is very less, and maybe in coming 2-3 decades we might not see much of the impacts, but it doesn't say that it doesn't rule it out altogether. And people who understand food chain, or the people who understand biological magnification or biological concentration, they do, give it a due importance that even if the concentration is very less, in the long term, it is going to affect. And radioactive waste is known for its long decay period. So that kind of uncertainties, when associated with it, it really makes it something to ponder on, and to do a systematic and temporal monitoring of these releases and their impacts. If all the laboratories, scientific institutions, they come with a similar kind of energy and spirit in the in the entire life cycle of release of this and its impact, probably we'll be able to get some satisfying evidences.
Fair enough.
Still, question mark remains there.
All right, viewers, if you're listening to my guests on the panel tonight, the jury, it seems, is still out on how safe is the Fukushima discharge plan really going forward. But that said, that's all we have time for. May I thank both my guests, Dr. Rajiv Nayan and Professor P.K. Joshi, for sharing your thoughts with our viewers at home and abroad. Thank you for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you for inviting.
Right, and moving on to some other news we are tracking here.